I don't go hiking anymore. People ask why, and I usually give a small answer. Lost interest. Got busy. Knees aren't great. The real reason takes too long to explain. And when I try, I notice something strange even now. Years later, my voice drops without me meaning it to. Like my body remembers before my mind does. This happened when I was 27. Back then, hiking was my way of clearing my head. No music, no podcasts, just boots, a backpack, and long stretches of silence where thoughts eventually slow down on their own. This particular hike was supposed to be easy. A marked trail, popular during the day. About 5 hours in, 5 hours out. I'd done harder ones alone before, so I didn't tell anyone except my cousin, casually, over a text. Going up north this weekend. Signal might be weak. That was it. The place was an old forested range, not far from a small mountain village. Nothing dramatic about it. Pine trees, uneven ground, old wooden trail signs nailed to trees, some of them so faded you could barely read them. I started early, around 6, 30 inches the morning. The air was cold enough to sting the inside of my nose when I breathed in. The kind of cold that smells clean. Damp soil, pine sap, wet leaves. For the first few hours, everything felt normal. My footsteps had that steady crunch, dirt, gravel, dry leaves, birds somewhere above, wind brushing the tops of trees, but not strong enough to move branches near me. There were other hikers at the start, couples. A group of 3 college kids laughing too loud. An older man with trekking poles who nodded at me but didn't speak. By the time I reached the midpoint rest area, I was alone. That didn't bother me. It usually didn't. I sat on a flat rock, drank water, ate half a sandwich. Checked my phone, no signal, like I expected. I remember thinking how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, just empty. No birds anymore. That should have registered as odd, but it didn't. When you hike alone a lot, you stop questioning small changes. I packed up and continued. The trail narrowed after that. Trees grew closer together. The light changed, not darker exactly, but flatter, like the forest was swallowing sound and color both. About 40 minutes later, I noticed something that made me stop walking. My footsteps sounded wrong, not louder, not softer, delayed. It's hard to explain. When you walk, your ears expect a rhythm. Step, sound, step, sound. But here, it felt like the sound was following me instead of coming from me, like it was a half-second late. I stopped. The sound stopped too. I stood there, listening. My breathing felt loud inside my jacket. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Nothing else. I remember smiling to myself, embarrassed. I'd been alone too long, brain filling in gaps. I took another step. Crunch. Again, just slightly off. I told myself the ground was uneven. Different layers of leaves. Moisture. Anything. I kept walking. 10 minutes passed. Maybe 15. That's when I heard footsteps that weren't mine. At first, they were faint. Soft presses against the ground, not heavy enough to echo. Somewhere behind me, I slowed my pace. They slowed too. I stopped completely. They stopped. I didn't turn around right away. I don't know why. Some instinct, maybe. Or denial. When you're alone in the woods, your mind fights hard against the idea that you aren't actually alone. I cleared my throat and spoke, trying to sound casual. Hello. My voice didn't travel far. The trees seemed to swallow it almost immediately. No answer. I turned around. The trail behind me was empty. Curving slightly to the left, disappearing between thick trunks and undergrowth. No movement, no birds, no wind. I stood there for a full minute, scanning, listening. Then another, nothing. I laughed quietly, more for myself than anything, and shook my head. Get it together, I muttered. I turned forward again and froze. There was something on the trail ahead of me that hadn't been there before. A shoe, just one, a hiking shoe, worn, brown, lying on its side right in the center of the path. I knew it hadn't been there when I last looked forward. I would have noticed it. It wasn't small. It wasn't hidden. I approached slowly. The laces were undone. The inside was dark, damp, Leaves stuck to the sole like it had been there a while. But the ground around it didn't look disturbed. No scuff marks, no drag trails, just the shoe. I stood over it, feeling that familiar internal argument start up. Someone dropped it. Someone messing around. Maybe it fell off a backpack. But none of those explanations felt right. I looked around and called out again. Louder this time. Hey, did someone lose a shoe? My voice sounded thin. Still no answer. I didn't touch it. Instead, I stepped around it and continued, though my pace picked up without me deciding to do so. After that, the forest felt different, not threatening. Worse, indifferent. The trees looked the same, but I started noticing how uniform they were. Trunks spaced too evenly. Underbrush thinning out, like the place had been cleaned, slowly, over time. I checked my watch. I should have been nearing the upper ridge by now. Instead, the trail seemed unchanged. Same incline, same curve, same rocks. I walked another half hour, then another. My legs burned. My breathing grew heavier. But the trail never opened up, never widened, never gave me that feeling of progress you usually get. That's when I saw the shoe again. Same one, same position, same leaves stuck to the sole. This time, my stomach dropped so hard I had to sit down. That's impossible, I told myself. I must have looped somehow, missed a turn. But I was following markers, red paint stripes on tree trunks. I remembered passing them. I remembered the slight bend where one marker was higher than the others. And yet, there it was, the shoe. My hands were shaking now. Not violently, just enough that I noticed. I pulled out my phone. Still no signal. Battery at 63%. I stood up and turned around, fully intending to go back. That's when I realized something I hadn't noticed before. The red trail markers behind me were gone. Not faded, gone. The trees were bare of paint. Smooth bark, where there should have been signs. I stood there, spinning slowly in a full circle, heart pounding. Ahead of me markers, behind me none. I didn't hear footsteps anymore, but I felt watched. Not in a dramatic way. Not like eyes burning into my back. More subtle, like when someone stands too close behind you in a line and you just know, I whispered, without thinking. This isn't funny. The forest didn't react. No echo, no wind. I made a decision then, one I still replay in my head sometimes. I stepped off the trail, just a few feet, enough to put trees between me and the path. The moment I did, the air changed. It felt thicker, harder to breathe. My ears popped slightly, like a pressure change, and behind me, on the trail, I heard footsteps again. This time, they didn't stop when I stopped. They kept coming, slow, measured, one step at a time. I didn't turn around. I don't know why. I still don't. I stood there, heart racing, sweat cold on my neck, listening as the footsteps came closer and closer, and then stopped exactly where I had been standing seconds before. There was a pause, long enough that my legs started to tremble. Then I heard breathing, not animal, not heavy, controlled, through a nose. In, out, close enough that I could hear moisture in it. I remember thinking very calmly, very clearly, if I turn around and see someone, I don't know what I'll do. I never turned around. Instead, I ran, not back to the trail, deeper into the trees. Branches slapped my face. Roots caught my boots. I didn't care. I just ran until my lungs burned and my vision blurred. At some point, I fell, hard. When I looked up, the forest looked normal again. Birds, wind, light shifting through leaves. The trail was a few feet away. Empty. No shoe. No footsteps. I didn't stop. I didn't rest. I didn't eat. I followed the trail down until my legs shook and my knees screamed. I reached the parking area just before sunset. There were cars there. People. Voices. Normal life. I sat in my car for a long time before driving. That night, at home, I unpacked my bag. At the bottom, under my spare shirt, was a brown hiking shoe. Just one. Laces undone. Still damp inside. I don't hike anymore, and sometimes, when I walk alone at night, I pay close attention to the sound of my own footsteps. Because every once in a while, they still sound a half-second late. I didn't tell anyone about the first incident. Not properly, at least. When people ask why, I usually say I didn't want the questions, the looks, the half-smiles that say you scared yourself. But the truth is simpler. Every time I tried to explain it out loud, the details started to slip. Not fade, change. So I kept it to myself. About 8 months later, I agreed to go hiking again. Not alone this time. It was supposed to be a short trip. 2 days, 1 night. A friend of mine, Imran, and his cousin were planning it, and they wanted someone experienced with routes and pacing. I hesitated longer than I should have, but nothing bad happens twice the same way, right? That's what I told myself. The location was further south, drier terrain, fewer trees, more open slopes, a known route that passed through an abandoned shepherd settlement, stone huts, collapsed roofs, nothing unusual. We started late morning. The sun was already high, but the air was cool, the kind that dries your throat quickly. Dust stuck to our boots. The path was wide enough that we walked side by side for most of it. Imran talked a lot, about work, politics, random things. His cousin mostly listened. I stayed quiet. Not because I was afraid, not consciously, but because I kept noticing small things. The way sound traveled strangely across the hills. How our voices echoed too clearly, then vanished. By mid-afternoon, we reached the old settlement. It was exactly what people had described online. 6 or 7 stone structures scattered across a shallow valley. No doors, no roofs, just knee-high walls and piles of rock where time had won. We decided to camp there. Looking back, that decision bothers me more than anything else. Not because of what happened, but because there was no real reason to stop there. We weren't tired, we had daylight, but something about the place felt convenient, like it was waiting. We set up tents as the sun dipped lower. The light changed quickly. Shadows stretched across the valley floor. The temperature dropped fast, colder than expected. I remember standing there, hands in my jacket pockets, watching the hills turn purple and gray. That's when Imran asked, casually, "Did you hear that?" "What?" I said. He tilted his head.
"Sounded like a whistle."
We all went quiet. At first, I heard nothing. Then, faintly, a thin, high sound drifting from somewhere uphill. Not a melody, just a single note held too long. Wind, I told myself, but the wind wasn't blowing. The sound stopped on its own. We laughed it off. Jokes about shepherds and ghosts. Someone said maybe it was a bird. We cooked, ate, talked. Darkness settled fully. The stars were bright. No clouds. The kind of sky that makes you feel small in a good way. Around 10 p.m., we went quiet. Imran and his cousin stayed up longer, talking softly. I lay in my tent, listening to the fabric move when I shifted. That's when I heard footsteps, slow ones, not heavy, careful, like someone trying not to be noticed. I assumed it was one of them walking around camp. But then I realized the sound was coming from farther away beyond the huts. I unzipped my tent slightly and peeked out. The campfire was dying down. Imran and his cousin were sitting together, facing the opposite direction, talking quietly. Neither of them was moving. The footsteps continued. They circled the settlement, not randomly, deliberately. Passing behind huts, crunching lightly over gravel. I whispered, "Imran." He looked at me. "Yeah? You walking around just now?" He frowned. "No? Why?" The footsteps stopped. The silence afterward felt heavy, thick, like sound was being held back. We all listened. Nothing. Imran shrugged. "Probably an animal." I didn't argue. We zipped our tents and went to sleep. At some point in the night, I woke up. I don't know why. No noise, no dream, just awake. The inside of my tent was pitch black. I reached for my phone 2:14 a.m. That's when I heard the whistling again. Closer this time. Not uphill. Not distant. Inside the settlement. It wasn't loud. It didn't echo. It sounded careful, controlled, like someone practicing a sound rather than calling out. I held my breath without meaning to. The whistle stopped. Then came footsteps. Slow, deliberate. They stopped near my tent. I could hear breathing, not rushed, not heavy. Someone or something was standing just outside. I stared at the thin line of fabric inches from my face. Every sense tuned sharp. I could smell dust, cold air, the faint scent of smoke from the dying fire. The breathing shifted, moved. I heard it pass the edge of my tent and head toward the others. I stayed frozen. Minutes passed, maybe more. Time felt wrong. Then a soft tapping sound. Not knocking, more like fingers brushing stone. One of the old huts, then another. Tup, 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 like counting. I heard Imran's cousin whisper something from his tent. His voice cracked halfway through the word. The tapping stopped. Silence. Then, from the darkness, a voice. Low. Calm. Not calling to us. Not shouting. Just speaking. I couldn't make out the words. They didn't sound like any language I recognized. The rhythm was wrong. Too even. No emotion in it. It moved as it spoke. From one side of the camp to the other. I pressed my forehead into the ground, trying to disappear. Eventually, the voice faded. The footsteps retreated. None of us slept after that. At first light, we packed without talking much. No jokes, no comments about the night. As we were leaving, Imran stopped near one of the huts. "Did you guys put this here?" he asked. Inside the hut, arranged carefully on a flat stone, were 3 objects: a pocket knife, a water bottle, and a torn piece of tent fabric. Mine, a clean rip, like it had been cut. We didn't take the trail back. We cut straight across the hills, ignoring markers, ignoring logic, just moving toward the road. No one followed us. No whistling. No footsteps. We reached the car by late afternoon. We didn't talk about it on the drive back. We still don't. Sometimes, I think about that voice. The way it spoke, like it didn't need us to understand, like the sound itself was enough. And sometimes, late at night, when everything's quiet, I catch myself holding my breath, listening, because part of me still expects to hear that whistling again. After the second incident, I promised myself I'd never go hiking at night again. I lied. A year later, I was drawn back, not by curiosity, not by thrill, but by necessity. I was visiting an old friend in a small village near the mountains. The roads were narrow, unpaved, flanked by forests so dense that cars had to slow down just to keep headlights on the path. He suggested we take a short hike the next morning. "Just a walk," he said. "No trails, nothing dangerous. You'll like it." I agreed, though my mind buzzed with warnings I didn't fully understand. We started just before sunrise. Fog hung low in the valley, clinging to the tops of pine trees. The smell of wet earth and moss filled the air. Birds called occasionally, but their voices seemed distant, swallowed by the mist. The first hour was uneventful. We walked along a narrow path between 2 ridges. Small streams ran alongside us, water flowing quietly over rocks. My friend chatted, laughed, trying to distract me, I think. Then we came to an abandoned cabin, partially hidden behind overgrown bushes. The wood was rotting, the windows were dark holes. I felt that same, familiar pull, the kind you can't explain. Something told me to go inside. I didn't. We skirted it, keeping to the outside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching. Hours passed. The hike was longer than I expected. Mist thickened, making visibility poor. The path became uneven, muddy. Each step I took felt heavier. Every sound, a twig snapping, a leaf falling, reverberated in my head. Around mid-afternoon, my friend suggested a short rest. We sat on a fallen log near a bend in the trail. The silence was thick. Too thick. My heart beat fast, and not because I was tired. That's when I heard it. A low, dragging sound coming from behind the trees. Slow, heavy, almost deliberate. I froze. My friend didn't notice immediately. The sound grew closer. Not steps, something else. Something wet, dragging across the soil. I whispered, "Do you hear that?" He looked puzzled. "It's just an animal." But it wasn't an animal. I know that now. The sound circled us. My friend's attention shifted elsewhere, maybe the view, maybe the trail, but I couldn't stop watching the tree line. A shadow moved. Too quick, too tall. Something slipping between trees with no sound except that dragging. I whispered again, louder. My friend finally turned. "Nothing's there," he said. His tone was calm, but his eyes flicked nervously. Then it stopped. Not gradually, just stopped. The silence afterward was worse than the sound. We decided to move. I led the way. But the moment I stepped forward, I felt it. Not a presence behind me, around me, above, below. Every step felt like being measured, counted, observed. A few minutes later, I tripped on a root. When I looked up, something was at the edge of the fog. I can't explain what it was. Shape? Humanoid? Taller than a man. Yes. Movements? Too fluid, unnatural. Just enough to be seen in a peripheral glance before the fog swallowed it again. I froze. My friend was a few feet ahead, unaware. I called out, but my voice sounded distant, faint. The thing vanished. We didn't stop again. I kept looking behind, half running, half walking. The trail seemed endless, twisting back on itself. Every familiar landmark seemed to disappear or reappear differently. Trees I remembered were gone. Rock shifted. Hours passed. Maybe minutes. I couldn't tell. We finally stumbled out near the village road. Sunlight waning. No fog, no shadow, no sound. We never spoke about it. I never returned to those trails. Weeks later, I received a message from my friend. "Check the old cabin, left something for you." Curiosity, foolish. Reckless curiosity made me go. Inside the cabin, on a splintered table, lay a small pile of dirt. Mixed in the soil were tiny footprints. Not human. Not any animal I recognized. Leading in a circle around the table, I never told anyone. And now, whenever I pass a forest or a path, I keep my steps quiet, my ears sharp. I don't look behind me, because some things follow differently than humans do. Not visible all the time. Not loud, but always there, always measuring, always patient. I haven't hiked since, and I don't think I ever will again. Sometimes at night, I still dream of those footsteps, and when I wake, I swear, I can hear a dragging sound outside my window.